Okay. So I'm going to show you how I went from these boards to this. But wait, because I don't understand something here. Yesterday I was scrolling through YouTube statistics and I see the number of subscribers 15%. I say there's a problem. I refresh 15. I refresh again 15. I say to myself, oh yeah, it's like that. That's what you're doing. But guys, subscribe. And those who don't, we see you, huh? Keep going. We'll come with our machete, our kalash, our knives, our weapons. Be careful. So the manga animation process is divided into 3 main steps. We will go through the cutting, which is a step that will allow you to retrieve the parts of the manga you want. After that, you should know that this step is important because it can take a lot of time if it is not prepared in advance, and we will talk about that later. Then you have the import into the editing software, and it's with this editing software that with the cut parts you will be able to make your first moves, so the better your cutting is done, the easier it will be for you to animate and use your images. So once you have imported and made the movements, we will move on to step 3, composition. Composition is what will enhance your editing because we will import the background, colors, and also effects. For me, it's the most satisfying step of the whole process. We will add little touches here and there, then all you have left to do is render, and after that, it's done. So, first of all guys, start by selecting your image. It's very important because the nicer the image you choose, the more you'll want to keep animating. So go to your cutting software. I chose Adobe Photoshop, it's the 2022 version, but you can use any software like CapCut, whatever you want. It will depend on your budget. In any case, this step is quite simple. You just need to cut out your image from the manga panel to have a transparent background behind it. In fact, that's the goal. So for me on Photoshop, it's an editing software, but it's very practical because there are 4 tools that are really good. So one, there's the lasso tool, which allows for rather rough selections. If the object to select is a fairly simple shape, it will be very quick. Then there is the quick selection tool. In fact, it's a tool that detects shapes and rounds them to make its own automatic selection. The downside is that it's not perfect, so it can detect other shapes and include them in its selection. So it should be used when the shape is quite distinct. Then there is what is called the stamp tool, which allows you to take a pattern and duplicate it in a certain place. It is quite practical if you want to copy edges or things you can't draw if you're bad at drawing like me, but it has some limits, so you have to be careful about the area you duplicate. Then there is the tool I personally use the most. It's the pen tool. It's a tool that allows you to select the edges of each of your selections quite precisely while adding shapes, curves, and it's really the most precise tool. However, it's the tool that takes the most time in the cutting stage. There you go. If you want to do like me and use Photoshop as a retouching tool and you're not familiar with the pen tool, for example, there are websites like the Bezier game where you can learn the basics of the pen tool by practicing on different levels. So there are levels that will train you on curves, others on fairly straight lines, and I tried it. It's quite fun, and honestly, you'll level up quite quickly. So the goal is to have that. I think it's not bad. By combining the different tools I mentioned, it took me about 6 minutes. If you're quite experienced, you might take less time. If you're a beginner, it will take a bit of time, but that's okay. You need to practice and you'll take less time. Now that you've cut, it's not finished. There's still the cleaning step. That is to say, we will remove everything, like bubbles, lines, basically anything that is not part of the character. So if a part of the hair is white, we will color it black to make it consistent. And if we have a part of the manga bubble on his big arm, well, we remove it. So we will make the necessary touch-ups. Same for the t-shirt. There, we see the reflection of the diamond in white on the black t-shirt. So we will remove everything by simply coloring it in black. So this step took me about 7 minutes to do. It's a bit longer than the cutting, but again, it depends on the animation you have to do. Obviously, if your animation lasts less than 1 second, it will be a bit less worthwhile because we won't have time to actually enjoy your animation. So now we move on to cutting the parts that will be animated. So be careful. Here, it's not about cutting out just anything. We're only going to cut out the parts we know we are going to animate, because if we cut everything, we'll waste a lot of time, and I'll explain why. So I know that I'm going to animate the character's 2 arms, so I'm going to cut them out with the pen tool, of course. Then once I have cut out the arm, if we remove it, we see that it's empty. So I will retouch it as best as I can to avoid seeing the hole when the arm moves. To add a bit of flow to the animation, I will also cut out the bottom of the jacket. And similarly, once I have cut it out, I do the retouching behind. And the same for the collar. I cut it out
out and then see if it creates holes or not. I repeat exactly the same step for all the parts I will cut out. So then for the hair, I cut out a few strands, but not too many, just to see how it looks in animation. So we have repeated the cutting step several times, so we have several layers we can animate. So once again, it depends on the length of your animation. If your animation lasts 1 second or more, it's worth animating the small details, as the viewer will have time to enjoy them. But if it lasts less than a second, it's up to you, because during the movement of your animation, the viewer might not have time to perceive the animation. Since I know that my animation will last more than 1 second, I decided to take 20 to 30 minutes to do the cutting and touch-ups of my Photoshop file. So now, before moving on to step 2, which is importing into the software After Effects, I will rename all of my layers that I have separated to find them more easily during the animation. There you go. These are small details, but when you have a lot of files in your project, it makes your life easier and saves you a lot of time. So there you go. Now, step 2, animation on After Effects. I create my project, I create my composition, and the first thing I do is create my 3D camera, because I know my animation will be in 3D. With experience, you will anticipate what kind of animation you want to do with your boards that you have cut out. So I roughly know it will be a 3-dimensional zoom out. I don't know exactly how I will do it, but I will progress little by little in my animation, then I will know what I want. In fact, in this video, I want to test something. So I will separate the position of the character's arm and the position of the character itself, so that when the 3-dimensional camera moves, we see a 3-dimensional effect. So on the character's arm. If you want to know more about creating a 3D camera, I made a tutorial on how to create a field effect in After Effects so that the scene is more realistic with only 2D shots. There are also all the resources available for free on my Payhip if you want to view step by step. So to start, I placed my character in the composition. I created a keyframe at the beginning and at the end of my composition to create a zoom out effect. I took some time to both frame the character and have this field effect on the character's arm. For that, I had to work with the keyframes to assess the distances separating the character's arm and finally get the result I want. At the same time, I tried to perform a rotation during the zoom out, but it seemed a bit too complex for the animation because it was hard to focus on the character, so I dropped the idea, I abandoned it. Then, after doing the zoom out, I animated the character's 2 arms moving closer to his body, as well as the diamond moving closer to the support on his hand to make the viewers understand that the main action is focused on the diamond. Once I worked on these movements, I made sure they matched my camera movements. Here is the result. Stylish, right? Since the animation was quite decent, I moved on to animating the jacket and the collar. This time, a little challenge because the jacket was both in front and behind. So I made a small adjustment to give the impression of the jacket passing both in front and behind the character. As for the collar, no problem. Everything went as planned. Then I added a slight lens effect to give depth to the edges. Just because I find it stylish, but you don't have to do the same. Everyone does as they like. Then I animated it so that it synchronizes with the zoom out effect to give a pretty stylish result. Here's the result. So, since I saw that the arm movements were going well and the collar and jacket movements were also going well, I moved on to the hair. So I went back to Photoshop. This time to carefully cut out the hair. So here, same process as before, cutting, and once we cut, we retouch to avoid having holes. I separate the different layers, then rename them to make it easier during animation. Then, once this step is completed, I re-import the file into After Effects because the old file does not have this additional hair cutout. So, I add them manually inside my After Effects composition, and I will place and move them so that when the transition occurs, each of the movements I created can be distinguished. So, I will create a slight offset between the animation of the different hairs as well as a different speed to create a wind effect going in all directions. So there you go. If we look at my composition without the camera zoom out, we can see that the result is quite good. So we check if everything is correct. After seeing that everything is correct without the zoom out, we proceed to the zoom out, and there you go. Now you can see it already looks impressive. Did you see? So now that the animation part is finished, we can move on to the composition part. And this is a part that will add much more beauty to this animation. Now, we can move on to step 3, which is composition. So, I started by adding a high quality background to observe the clouds because I find it stylish. Plus, I like the color, and with the lens effect I added earlier, it gives a pretty good effect. Then, to simulate a slight wind that obstructs the camera's focus, I added an effect called Gaussian blur. It's an effect that is widely used. Then, for the coloring of my character, I went on Google to find as many references as possible. In this manga, there aren't a lot, but what I found is enough to make something decent. So I go back to Photoshop, and with the help of the different tools mentioned earlier, I simply apply my colors to each cutout part. Now, you can do it beforehand, but I prefer to see the animation first before taking the time to cut and color because it takes time. I've already fully colored the character before without even animating it in the end, so I want to be sure of my move beforehand. It took me about 20 minutes in total. I wasn't super focused, but I managed to finish the job in less than half an hour, so I think that's pretty decent. So, after saving my coloring, boom, my character is fully colored in After Effects, because when I modify the source file, After Effects refreshes the entire project folders in real time. Then, I moved on to coloring the diamond. It's supposed to be a diamond with colors familiar to those of Zekrom, but dark blue is not a very radiant color, so I had to find a very light color to give a bright radiance effect. I opted for light blue. Then I played with the orientation of the lights and shadows on the character to have a logical illumination in my eyes. I also add overlays to indicate that the diamond is shining and that an action is going to happen. Then, I add overlays of the same color and place them in the right position. I add an effect called deep glow to ensure a radiant effect. I also add impact frames. In fact, it's a method widely used in the animation world to indicate that an impact or explosion is going to occur. It's usually a successive mix of black and white screens. And there you go, cool, it really looks like something. So indeed, I could have added particles or even text, why not, but I preferred to keep it simple this time. So there you go, now for the second image, same process. Before starting anything, I imagined the movement. So I analyzed the page and then I understood that I would like to create a movement that goes from bottom to top to emphasize the rise of the diamond. After this step is completed, I can move on to cutting the manga board. Then I cut out the different elements that will be in motion. I do the touch-ups, cover the holes made by the cutting, then import them into After Effects. Then, in After Effects, with the puppet tool, I see what the movement looks like. I add motion blur to simulate a fast movement effect. Then, when the movement is fairly correct, I move on to the composition. In terms of background color, I take almost the same as the first composition, because we must not forget that these two scenes are connected. I copy them with a few exceptions to get what I want. Since the camera will make a vertical movement, I like to use the effect called optical flare, with small lenses to indicate the camera's movement. Then, I add a slight effect called wave warp that will add very fine waves to connect this scene with the first one we made. Once the composition is finished, I make the connection between the two. You can also add sound effects on After Effects and Premiere Pro to make your scene more realistic. I add sound effects called whoosh or build up to prepare for the action that will follow. And here is the result. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed learning more about how I animate this kind of shot. Let me know in the comments what you liked or what you would like to see. I have quite a few ideas at the moment, maybe even too many, but oh well. Try to combine with the manga animation projects that have been ongoing for 2 months, ideas for 3D short films with maybe different manga characters meeting. That could be fun, memes, or even the animation of the JoJo Leon chapter that I forgot about. Anyway, in any case, don't hesitate to give me advice. I respond to all comments. See you next time. Bye.